The unsettling world of Japanese horror, also known as J-horror, has given us viewers some of the most traumatizing films we've ever seen. We're talking about movies that have tormented us by featuring what categorically happens to be the scariest monsters. No points for guessing that in today's video, we're going to be looking at the most terrifying monsters in Japanese horror films. From a giant pale head to a slit-mouthed woman, you name it, and our list has it. We're ready to dive right in, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have a very small request. If you enjoy our content, then please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Sadako Yamamura Ringu, 1998. While there's no denying that Gore Verbinski's supernatural horror film The Ring became one of the highest-earning horror remakes of all time, it was Hideo Nakata who was the first to bring the terrifying tale to the screen with Ringu. Back when the Japanese film was released, the whole idea of a cursed videotape that kills anyone who watches it after 7 days was not only interesting and ingenious, but also deeply disturbing. But of course, having said that, Nakata's Ringu was actually based on Koji Suzuki's 1991 mystery horror novel, Ring. Story-wise, Ringu, which was backed by an intriguing screenplay by Hiroshi Takahashi, has a reporter teaming up with her psychic former husband to probe deeper into a cursed videotape that has its viewers mysteriously dying 7 days after watching it. Meet Sadako Yamamura, the terrifying, pale-looking, long black-haired dead girl who categorically happens to be one of the most frightening horror antagonists ever conceived, setting the bar unbelievably high. As the vengeful ghost of a young woman possessing psychic powers who was trapped inside a well where she died, Sadako Yamamura has a thing for crawling out of television sets, or her favorite well for that matter. Mind you, her crawling out sequences aren't for the faint of heart or the squeamish ones. The scenes are acutely distressing as they effectively blur the lines between what is reality and what is fiction, thereby subjecting the audience to a visceral psychological ambush. Ringu is an enduring cult classic today, but back then it was a pioneer that popularized Japanese horror, leaving a whole generation of spectators with a lasting sense of dread every time the TV went static. A grotesque, snail-like human abomination, Uzumaki, 2000. Higuchinsky marked his feature film directorial debut with Uzumaki, which, in case you didn't know, was actually based off of Junji Ito's horror manga series, also of the same name. It's only fair to admit that Higuchinsky effortlessly managed to capture the very essence of the manga, making it an effectively moody horror film, despite departing from the story of the original work and featuring a different ending. The narrative, which is defined by its surreal setting, constantly increasing strangeness, ominous background score, and dare we disregard the weird angles and creepy visuals, has the dwellers of the small town of Kurotsucho becoming exceedingly obsessed with all things spiral, pushing them to the brink of insanity and including a series of extremely bizarre and highly disturbing deaths. So we're looking at a visually entrancing and engagingly offbeat horror film with a horde of creatively terrifying and effectively gross sequences standing on their own, quite marvelously may we add. There is a rather unique washing machine death scene which one must see to believe. Anyways, from bodies twisting into spiral-like contortions and eyes rotating like whirlpools to women growing Medusa-like gravity-defying hair, the special effects on display are both impressive and effective, with the winner ultimately being the grotesque, snail-like human abomination. Do you have something better? Well, please let us know in the comments section down below. Kayako Saeki, Ju-on the Grudge, 2002. Takashi Shimizu's Ju-on the Grudge categorically happens to be one of the best J-horror films to have ever been made, giving its viewers a rather unsettling viewing experience solely because of two reasons, one of which happens to be the absolutely terrifying ghost of Kayako Saeki on display. If you take a look at the non-linear narrative, which not only happens to be the second reason, but also works wonders for the film, the plotline focuses on an evil curse that's born of a powerful rage, gathering in the place where the dead once lived, with the evil curse and the vengeful spirits of a murdered woman and son lingering in a house where the brutal murders took place. Anyone who enters the house ultimately winds up dead. First things first, we're dealing with an incredibly made movie here. The unfussy soundtrack further intensifies the tense and eerie ambiance that the flick depends on, the old-fashioned editing, the diligent use of silence, and of course, we have the spirit of Kayako Saeki to build a close-to-perfection haunting feeling. Every scene featuring the butchered mother ghost Kayako is downright spine-chilling, be it her crawling under the sheets, through the attic, down the stairs, or say peeking around a corner with her head full of long black hair and face occasionally covered in blood. Mark our words when we say Kayako Saeki is the poster girl for what a Japanese ghost is expected to be. Hiruko, Hiruko the Goblin, 1991. There are many Japanese horror movies out there that have produced gratuitous amounts of ghouls and goblins, capable of giving even the most demented gore fans something to cheer about, along with plenty of sleepless nights. Well, this brings us to Shinya Tsukamoto's Hiruko the Goblin, which is based on Daijiro Morohoshi's Lovecraftian horror manga, Yokai Hunter. Now, in case you need to brush up on your Japanese vocabulary, yokai are spirits from Japanese folklore, which means they're highly capable of causing chaos of a much more powerful nature. Coming back to the storyline of Hiruko the Goblin, a bunch of teens go searching for one of their missing fathers at their school, which is closed for summer vacation, only to discover that their school is plagued by a rogue demon, the titular Hiruko, who takes delight in severing the heads of anyone who gets in his way. When it comes to the effects on display, they are rather impressive given the time the movie was released. As one would normally expect from a Tsukamoto flick, there is a lot of amazing makeup and prosthetic work featured here, giving birth to exceedingly unsettling creatures. What we have is an effective, absolutely terrifying spider-like creature with the severed head of a human. Believe us when we say that the grotesque appearance, especially when scuttling, is just too much to bear. As for the titular yokai, what makes him even more terrifying is that he was the one sent to Earth with a harrowing and nightmarish mission in mind. Remember when we said Hiruko has a penchant for decapitating human heads? Well, he uses the newfound heads to plant himself and the rest of his demonic brethren. Still don't think he's terrifying, or maybe you've changed your mind? Let us know in the comments section down below. Tetsuo the Iron Man, 1989. Shinya Tsukamoto's nightmarish cyberpunk cult hit is pretty much the hardest movie to watch out of everything mentioned on our list today. This highly harrowing sci-fi horror, one that's also written by Tsukamoto, begins with a metal fetishist inserting scrap metal into a self-imposed wound on his thigh. Upon finding his wound infested with maggots and experiencing intolerable pains, he runs down the street like a maniac and gets hit by a passing car driven by a salaryman. Things take a very ugly and unexpected turn when the salaryman realizes that he's gradually transforming into a grotesque hybrid of flesh and rusty metal, and somehow the metal fetishist happens to be the orchestrator behind the salaryman's whole transformation. Truth be told, it was David Cronenberg's Videodrome that eventually led a highly impressed Tsukamoto to make Tetsuo the Iron Man. That being said, the film certainly carries its unique flair, having a huge fan base, including Quentin Tarantino. The movie gives one plenty of reasons to watch it repeatedly. To begin with, there's no denying that it's a haunting body horror film featuring a very impactful musical score by the late Japanese composer and musician Chu Ishikawa. Then there's Tsukamoto and Kei Fujiwara's highly appealing cinematography work, but somehow everything falls flat in front of the character of the metal fetishist, which, mind you, is also played by Tsukamoto. It's fair to say that he absolutely steals the show with the moody black and white cinematography work, making him appear even more menacing. The metal fetishist is pure evil, and he delivers plenty of horror, ensuring that he lingers in the minds of even the most jaded horror hounds. Kuchisake-onna, Carved, the Slit-mouthed Woman, 2007. Koji Shirayoshi's supernatural horror film is based on the popular Japanese urban legend of Kuchisake-onna. The titular being, also known as the Slit-mouthed Woman, is described as the spiteful spirit of a young woman with long black hair who has her face partly covered with a mask and carries a large pair of scissors. The woman would ask potential victims if she is pretty, and it wouldn't matter whether they said yes or no, she would eventually reveal her mutilated face that has the corners of her mouth slit from ear to ear. Afterwards, she would either kill her victims or cut the corners of their mouths, giving them the same disfigurement. As for the plot line of Carved, it follows a divorced teacher probing deeper into a series of child abduction cases in a small suburban town and deducing that the legend of Kuchisake-onna is the answer to the children's abrupt disappearances. Kuchisake-onna is hands down one of the most underrated horror movie monsters ever on screen. We're looking at a villainous entity that can not only possess bodies but also jump from one body to the next, thereby being virtually undefeatable. Add to this her signature weapon, which happens to be an absurdly large pair of scissors, which makes her a terrifying predatory murderess, if not the scariest being on this list. Like it or not, her highly unsettling appearance and the urban legend she's based on make her a very strong contender for one of the best horror monsters out there. Then again, that's just our opinion, but we'd like to know what yours is. The Floating Head, Death Forest, 2014. Masataka Ichimi's Death Forest is an obscure and hard-to-find Japanese horror film based on Kaz's popular horror game of the same name. Story-wise, the film features a group of friends happily camping in the forest. On their way home, they take a detour, believing it's a shortcut, but when their car breaks down deep in the middle of the forest and they're stranded with no phone service, they're oblivious to the fact that there's much more to worry about than meets the eye. Well, there is something about Japanese horror that manages to hit fans in all the right ways, and that brings us to the start star of this movie, one that irrefutably happens to be the giant human-consuming floating head. As much as this whole thing may sound silly, we urge you not to make the mistake of underestimating this entity, because the monster will not even hesitate once before devouring its target. Also, once it has its eyes and mouth set on the victim, there's no saving the person because the relentless floating head will pursue its prey to the very end, after which it will simply devour you with a single bite. There is also a particular tunnel scene that has our floating head chasing our lead characters, and if you have an epileptic seizure while watching it, don't blame us. After all, we did warn you. Right now, be careful. Mushroom Mutant Creatures, Matango, 1963. Ishiro Honda's Matango, which is partially based on William Hope Hodgson's short story titled The Voice in the Night, revolves around a bunch of shipwrecked survivors who get stranded on a mysterious fog-shrouded, seemingly deserted island. With their food supply starting to run low and no sign of rescue, they decide to devour the mushrooms on the island, unaware that it will have disastrous effects, transforming them into grotesque-looking humanoid mushroom creatures. Holy shiitake. If you're in the mood for a bizarre, ingenious, nightmarish fantasy, then do watch Matango. Honestly speaking, we're looking at a surprisingly low-key, highly atmospheric Japanese horror fantasy that was way ahead of its time. Despite Honda having kept the mushroom mutant creatures hidden for the most part, the occasional glimpses of their distorted features adds to the element of terror, keeping the audience wrapped up in it. It also becomes very clear that the creatures are absolutely hideous, and somehow the whole idea of being altered into a walking mushroom monster works wonders for this film. Mitsuko Kawaii, Dark Water, 2002. Hideo Nakata is usually known for making movies that are pretty scary. Just take Ringu, for example. So no wonder we have Dark Water here, which, to be honest, is no exception. Based on Koji Suzuki's collection of short stories, also titled Dark Water, the film follows a divorced mother who moves into a rundown old apartment with her daughter, only to experience strange paranormal occurrences, one of which happens to be a mysterious, persistent dark water leak from the ceiling above. Backed by an intriguing screenplay by Yoshihiro Nakamura and Kenichi Suzuki, Dark Water is a rewarding horror movie that isn't everyone's cup of tea. As if the mere thought of the vengeful spirit of Mitsuko, who drowned in the apartment's water tank, wasn't scary enough, we have Kenji Kawai's effective background score along with Nakata's askew camera angles to make the malignant entity appear even more intimidating, thereby heightening the tension and taking the feeling of unease notches higher. Marvelous verdict! Well, with this, we finally come to the end of our video. So what are your thoughts on the terrifying monsters that are featured so prominently in J-horror films? Did your favorite one make it to the list? We would absolutely love to know which of these monsters messes with your head the most, especially if they didn't make the list. Now, if you enjoy this video, you know what to do. Please leave us a thumbs up and stay tuned, as we promise to be back with more exciting content. Till next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.